what should we say exactly? Well, firstly, so I'm Mika Savela, and I'm one half of the Selim Projects, and then plus that person is Henrik, and the other half. And I think like for maybe around 7 years now, like we've done these projects that we often define as somewhere in the margins of architecture and design, and often working with publications or exhibitions or other formats. And one of the things that we often thought of when sort of like working with different people, visiting places, was that wouldn't it be nice to maintain some kind of like a relationship after the workshop, after the something, after the event, and I think like one of the ways that we get to continue working with people is that let's do a publication together, or let's do a magazine together, and build them around those experiences and places. And well, we sort of like our paths have crossed with Anadana maybe like 5 years ago already, and 6 in the future architecture business. And we got to be involved in places like now in Pula. We were just thinking that it's been 6 years that we came here for the first time to the first publishing acts event, and met Daniel and other people here. And then afterwards we participated in consecutive workshops in Shibani, and then we also visited other places along the Adriatic coast, and then in Croatia, but very somehow hypnotized by the building complex there, and ended up talking with a lot of people. So it felt like somehow natural to work on an issue. And then together with Anadana, we decided to call it ADRIA, which is a kind of imaginary, let's say, existence. We started talking about what should we include, how should we approach it. We talked about having a psychedelic road trip along the Adriatic Highway. But what then happened was, of course, that we started on something, and then the pandemic came upon us, and it became a little bit longer discussion and a longer, more serious topic as well, because I think for us these have been very decidedly slim endeavors. It's always a very, I think it's like 36 pages, A4 format, trying to be very quick energy about it, like kind of do this sort of scene. But for us it became a much longer process, and the conversations we had also changed a little bit during the project. But I think it worked in our advantage. The SLIM format often looks at the idea of visiting places, and in the context of Croatia, that somehow turned us into the phenomenon of tourism, and how it is so centrally embedded in the contemporary life and in these cities along the coast. Through Anadana, we came into contact with lots of different people who have practiced and who are actively pursuing things, cultural things, artistic things, discussions, projects that operate these realms. And as one of the sort of central discussions and themes, then became this topic of critical tourism, which is something that we got to know through Beroš, who is here, and Fritz, who have been working at the time in the Great Area organization or gallery. And we had sort of a lengthy conversation conversation that some parts of it was conveyed here. In addition, there are glimpses and clips and sound bites almost, I don't know if it works in written form, but somehow, of things we've seen, of archival clips, of highway projects, of artistic practices, exhibitions that we've seen, all embedded into a few nice frames and then nicely printed at the Zagreb University Press. I think that it's kind of like a project that we enjoyed very much, and doing these sort of small publications contains a lot of power, I think, because it can sort of like put people in contact with each other, and then that will sort of last longer than maybe the paper here. But I also started to look at somehow maybe this is something that Anadana can then continue about, that in some way also this publication continues our participation in some of those publishing acts booklets, and I do notice a sort of a tendency that we have, that our practice at Selim, we kind of like tend to try to sort of like look at things in ways that are, and I don't know how to put this in the correct way perhaps, but that we are able to look at things because we don't talk too seriously, you know. And this is a little bit hard to maybe explain, but sort of like it allows us to come and look and talk and act maybe more openly. And I think like that that is something that I now start to see if I look at a continuation of some of these projects. But Dana, please continue. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Mika, for explaining Selim project Slim in a fanzine shape. This edition has been published closely like in Flight magazine on purpose, a bit self-ironic, because it's actually depicting, let's say, the disaster of the tourist mono economy, and it's very light and it's very seductive even from the cover, which is actually a collage of two locations of Krvavica, the famous pine forest that you will be seeing tomorrow in the videos of Rebecca and Joaquin, if not in other pictures, and also Portugal that Mika mentioned, which is like one of the base of grey area where Beroš and Fritz worked for over a decade on the concept of critical tourism. It was important that, contrary to the, let's say, usual way of curators working with a specific term or specific thematic, that they approach it theoretically and then find artists and works that actually go in line with their ideas. The term of critical tourism evolved really through, how to say, groundbreaking work of artists and curators together in this processual way of many years in Portugal, but elsewhere. So besides this important conversation, there are also some images, archival images of the photographic, let's call them memory books of the construction of the Adriatic Highway, like the Grand Tour of Europe, like the Grand Tour of the Adriatic, but also artists as Maritime, whose presentation you'll be seeing tomorrow. The organization from Makarska is shown here in the work of this How to Cure Person Care, which is like a direct connection with the work that we are doing now, or also younger generations of artists from the late Dalmatia, such as Lana Stanicevic, and the works of fantastic pink cakes of architecture and the architectural style of the urbanization of the literal coast and such, but also works of filmic works and journeys through the Žarkovica hill just behind the old city of Dubrovnik as some Belvedere point that is now the ground, not at this very moment, but it was for decades ground, some sort of a semi-legal, illegal animal shelter, you know, all the consequences of the mass tourism and of this beautification of the tourist gates that was actually tied. But it's interesting, like immediately I can briefly show you the very first publishing act that was going on in Pula in 2017 with DAI SAI. It was conceived as some sort of experimental publishing workshop, so to immediately, after a very brief encounter with a certain city, mostly with young artists, creators coming from abroad, to deal with something, Mika was explaining that in a certain way it could be an advantage. We always tried in sequel editions always to get this connection with the locality and with the locals to be firmer and to understand it in a more, let's call it a deeper way, to find some open, let's call it like socio-spatial imaginaries of the city. So of course already in 2017 Pula until recently was not in focus of this tourist invasion as we know it today, as it was heavily militarized and industrialized city. No matter that there is like a huge Colosseum in the city, it was some in a way at the margins, you know, of the tourist gates that we're saying. So we had artists coming from Italy, Greece, France, dealing with the so-called Pula documents, and it's interesting that let's call it like the end result, which is never like the end result. It was a silk-printed edition, like some sort of an artist edition of maybe 40 copies. So now this is like the last copy that I have, so please do not take it away. And it consists of unusual cartographies, I would say, on the city of Pula. It's beautiful because like it was literally probably printed by Emil Jurcan in the cooperative of Praxa, which is now non-existent. Tomorrow we'll have lunch at Alighieri's restaurant, and you'll see that one of the facades is missing, and that was the place where the cooperative was. So this is a bit of a tribute to it, either in the micro cities idea of the city of this heterotopic site of two cities never meeting, you know, the city of the local and the city of the tourist. Or there was another edition, which is actually the Selim Projects edition, the idea of Pula being like the perfect site for post-national because like Pula is only a couple of hours away by boat from Venice, and this comparison is quite striking. So imagine if we would have like a non-national pavilion happening just close to the hotel that we are saying now, the Beroš hotel. So these are literally works of art, or the ideas as the Pula has been overpopulated. There was no relation to the sea or the citizens, any access to the beach. The Greek artist and architect worked on the idea of the new archipelago of new artificial islands in the Pula Aquatorium, where actually the original citizens get evacuated and live on the islands, and actually for the very first time they have this vista of the city from the sea. But actually, I mean, in this imaginary, it had a factual example of the Friar Island, where there is a camp, and residents of Pula do evacuate during the summer months and, you know, spend their summers on a little island and not in the city. And also there there's a political statement by Leopold Lambert on the Great Wall. Most of you will be passing by the Arsenal Wall. It's literally about this elimination and the walls as military technology that they steal territory, cities, neighborhoods. When the military leaves, the walls remain as endless curtains of stone whose violent effects never fully dissolve. So you might have also already got the tenor of that. The second edition of Publishing Act happened in Šibenik in 2018. And this might seem, like a friendly family project, but it is not. But Mika and Henrik got there. We were very happy that we were able to collaborate parallelly in the project with Sonja Legoš, with the Innovation project. And after working with this immediate, which was not in fact immediate print, the self-print, the second edition in Šibenik, addressing again topics of deindustrialization, demilitarization, and diversification, ended in quite a different shape in a publication that was a print on demand. And it's interesting because in the very first editions, we were heavily influenced and working with Rebecca Kiesewetter on this idea of publishing as a spatializing act, thinking about publishing and the idea of space, like conceptually creating thematic space or creating that physical editorial sweatshop, we might call it like that. It was always understood as a processual device evoking and framing a social and discursive sphere for multiple negotiation, self-reflection, sense-making, and differentiated production. Of course, those are highly conceptual terms, but it means that we were always involving many people, very different views and takes on the city, either from a local, from a professional, or from an artist coming abroad. And it was evolving through years, and in the later editions, we actually moved as Publishing Acts is sort of a migratory editorial workshop. We moved to Rijeka in 2019 and 2020. That was sort of important because Rijeka in 2020 was the European capital of culture. But in this edition, in this broken Italian, Fiume Novare, we worked in 2019, and already back then we sort of were envisioning like what would happen on the last day of the European capital year. What are the cultural policies, what the city is going to offer to a single citizen. And in that case, of course, through the former future architecture, we were able to involve international emerging voices, young architects literally coming from Siberia because we were in contact with the Strelka Institute, or coming from Georgia. So this time was like heavily politically charged, locally and internationally, and it actually developed quite nice concepts, close collaboration from a foreigner and from, let's call it, a local expert. But for instance, this one I like very much, the Delta Plan. Some of you are familiar with the Rijeka, and the Delta is one of the areas in the, border port area. It's not the container port, but it's very downtown, and the artist worked on the idea of this entire part of the city being returned to the sea in a way. So like that the citizens of Rijeka made a good deal with the sea and sold out the delta. So it's like the ultimate revenge on the sea and enabled the right to the water, like the citizens' right to the water. But besides this sort of, we might even call it cartography, there are works on some documentation interviews with some pop-up companies, etc. We have many copies because the idea of Fiume Novare, after experimenting with this almost like artist edition of silk print and the print on demand, this was a roto print, like a newspaper print, and it was done in a edition of 40,000, and it is the first bilingual edition. And it was important that you'll see in the concept that as the languages are colliding with each other, but also the concepts and ideas, and we have many copies, so as many as you like, you are welcome to take. I will share some with you. And now I'll just show a little bit of the publishing acts in the next year, in 2020, that also happened in Rijeka, but it was actually more focusing on the pedagogies of care and, well, let's say, the education or the fluent education of architects. And I'll show you a little bit of footage as well. Let's see how the technology will be serving us now. So now when you're flipping the Pula publication, I can just briefly show you, I think it will help. Okay. Yeah, it's a bit fast, but now you have the physical copy, and now with this, how to say, kinetic presentation, it was important that the concepts are sort of circular and combined and working together, from one to another, like I said, from the English to Croatian, either the ideas of the building city or the ideas of this new plans for the city of Rijeka, or some, everything is written in some passwords and in some codes, but in a way I think you will find, well, in a sense, enticing. So, like I said, we counter cartography either in the non-present delta that I showed you, or actually the sinking city, etc. So there is like a critique of the cultural policy of the European Union actually presented, or how to say, violently pushed on a city like Rijeka. And we must know that at this very moment, it's like 2 years after the European Capital of Culture, the city of Rijeka does not even have like a city office for culture. It's merging the city office with the city office of culture and sports and God knows what. So. But so we were kind of like the Pula prophets. Okay, let's just do this one. So the following year, in 2020, just a second, how it works. Like I mentioned briefly, we were focusing on pedagogies of care, focusing on other ways of meeting, working together. It's the year of the pandemic, but we did have like a physical meeting of defined bodies. We were at a high risk. Some people, of course, did not arrive from abroad. Some did, and we spent time in this premises in the Delta area of Rijeka. But the entire project, as it was some sort of a ending year, tried to recreate again all the publishing acts that happened previously in some digital exhibition, which of course had greater access to public, but also it was important, this symposium and workshop held in Rijeka. Now these are just like the very first footage that you are now seeing in your hands of the publishing acts. One, I'm just showing it briefly, or some images of the sequel edition in Insured. And it's important now here to show like the unexpected ways of distribution, showing Fiume Novara as some sort of a prop for I don't know what kind of a lifestyle magazine. So with all our efforts of like physically sharing the ideas and the energies of this very small print of silk print that Emil was sweating for days, or like with the distribution of the newspaper, nothing has the reach as this beautiful woman with a prop. The pedagogies of care, of course, try to recreate, well, at least a temporary community that sort of focused on the care for the other, no matter what we were, like the actuaries that we were at the moment, and trying to share whatever little resources that we had, trying to work on the ideas of that are not, I mean, to work in a way and collaborate in a way that is not hierarchical, that is caring on each other, caring on yourself. And there was an important somatic experience. I'll show some videos later on it through a workshop with an artist, with a choreographer and dance artist, but also very important political activist, Selim Projects, just to mention her, but of course to mention the radio school that we held during the convention in Rijeka, which was important to have a radio broadcast of the content that was made or prepared in advance for the event in Rijeka. So now I'll just skip from here because there are some a bit of complications with the videos around here, but I'll just show you three very brief videos whose author is Stefanic here, also documenting us. And yeah, so the radio school, just a second. If we can turn on the loudspeaker. And then, is it already connected with the Bluetooth? Okay, let's. Okay, sorry.
The Radio School is part of the Publishing School Pedagogies of Care Symposium, an online exhibition running this year in Rijeka, Croatia, under the Future Architecture platform. This is one of 3 pre-recorded discussions around the topic of radio as an educational space that took place remotely from various locations prior to the symposium. Please excuse the varying audio quality as we attempt to record conversations across the globe from people's homes. Thank you.
So besides, like creating a brief utopia among us, of course it was important to get involved with the location, with Rijeka, with the different organizations, community radios, etc., dealing with spatial topics. I'll just show you now briefly parts of the walks in the city. These are all very short videos.
In Rijeka, there are lots of places where you have to choose where to go next, but rarely are they as special as this one. Left is Polic, right is Sushak, and behind you the city center. The stairs, which are said to never have been counted, lead to Tersat. In front of you stand Ružičeva and Pula. While you are thinking of which way to go, rest in the shade of the railway bridge or stand with someone under the Baroque portal. If you find the right spot, the dome will amplify your voice. There, you can whisper to each other that, after all, you are going to Hartea.
It's important to mention that the voice that you're hearing now is the voice of Maritime, who was doing the design works for us for the publishing school, and who is now heavily involved with the municipal work, even politically, but also through this Miestny Odbor, I don't know how, municipal council in Hartea, in the place that you've seen, and organizing weekly events, for the elderly and the young, and literally working hard as on the topic. And last short video.
What is care?
Sorry?
What is care? Care. Care.
Okay.
Care, emotion.
What do you use it
This can't work. Where is it closure?
Where is it?
Where does it place? Louder? Where does it place?
How do we care?
So it was 2020. The risk was worth it. I mean, in a way, nobody got infected. We were sound and safe and broadcasted the content prepared at the moment and previously on the topics of education, on deschooling the society through this radio broadcast and the online exhibition that is still accessible at this www.publishingacts.eu. So there is like a huge archive of all the works that I just briefly mentioned now. So thank you for your attention, and if you have some questions or if you're scared about the proceedings of tomorrow, please let me know after this presentation. Or we can just continue, of course, with the drinks as we started at the very beginning, in the middle. So now is Act 3, so I can turn off.
Should we be afraid of the workshop?
Definitely.
Yes, you do.